Thank you very much and welcome to this Derbyshire Planning Committee. There's a bit of housekeeping to do first. I'd just like to draw people's attention to the projector board about evacuating the building. We're not expecting a fire drill, so if you do hear it, it will be for real. Please leave by the main doors, go down the stairs, out of the main door and congregate on the top back end of the car park. Also, just for your information, we are being recorded live and it's being streamed over the internet. So if anybody doesn't want to be filmed, please let Jim, our officer at the back, know now. No? In which case then what we'll do is we'll move on with the agenda. So, agenda item 1, apologies and substitutes. Jackie.
Mr. Chair, we've received apologies tonight from Councillors Burfoot, Fitzherbert, Purdy and Sutton, and attending as substitutes are Councillors Donnelly, Froggatt, Wayne and Wakeman.
Thank you. Item 2, approval of minutes of the previous meeting. I so move.
Second.
All those in favour? Thank you. Right, item 3, interests.
Yes, Chair. I'll have to leave the room at item 4.6.
Thank you.
Chair, can I just have clarification of the nature of the interest?
Personal interest.
Non-pecuniary. And the nature of the interest, please?
I know the architect.
Thank you.
I also have an interest for 1801 Green Lines that I am it's a non-pecuniary personal interest and that I have personal connections to the school, family connections to the school.
Right, thank you very much. So we'll move on to the full body of the agenda now. So application 4.1, application number 19/0076 is full application for 2-storey rear extension at Park House, Matlock Green, Matlock. Now I have got a speaker on this, so I'd like to ask Mrs. Seale if she'd like to address the committee. We've got 5 minutes. I'll indicate when you've got 30 seconds.
Hello, I'm Sharon Seale and I'm speaking in favour of the 2-storey extension at Park House, Matlock Green. I understand from Ward Member Councillor Fitter that there's been no objection by any of the neighbours to the 2-storey two-storey extension. The proposal is not considered to have any adverse impact on the house or the surrounding area, and I believe it's been recommended for approval and none of my neighbours object to it whatsoever. There has been, what I see here, a concern about construction vehicles affecting the Share Drive and Lane Road. No vehicles will be left unattended so that the neighbour that we share the drive with would be able to get in and out of his access for the shared drive at all times while we're doing this build. We also thought that we could do a schedule of deliveries to the neighbours so not to affect their everyday life, parking, or so that we don't affect them in any way while we're having the construction done. And all construction materials will be on our property and will not be on any shared property or the shared drive or the shared access. And we're going to do a clean and a quick build in line with all the materials and the plans submitted. We won't be hanging around and leaving. We hope to keep harmony with our neighbours while we do this construction. Well, that's all I've got to say on the matter. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Seale. Officers, want to come back on anything that was raised?
Only very briefly, Chair, on this one, just to point out to members that a site visit was undertaken this afternoon. Members consider the two main issues to assessing in respect of this application as the impact on the development on the character and appearance of the existing property and also the residential amenity of the occupants of neighbouring dwellings. As set out on site, the form, siting and general appearance of the extension or extensions to the property are in keeping with the character and appearance of the property. We're satisfied that from a design perspective that the extensions will be compliant with development plan policies, hence why we're recommending approval of this application. There are no significant impacts on the occupants of neighbouring properties. The previous speaker, or the applicant, has indicated that they will be respectful of utilising the shared access to serve the development whilst construction works are taking place. We've carefully thought about that, so we're satisfied that all matters have been addressed, and we're happy to recommend approval of this application.
Thank you. Members, questions? No? Then we'll move straight into debate. Councillor Bull.
Yes, Chair. After being on the site visit today, as the officers just stated, I can't see there being any detrimental impact to the neighbours. Obviously, the work going to be considered is going to be done in the consideration of the neighbours anyway, and I think it will just level out and make it equal, and the design looks quite acceptable, so I'm willing to propose that we go for officers' recommendation.
So you're moving that, Councillor Bull? Councillor Slack, can I find a second?
Second, actually, yeah, I agree with Sue that if looking at all wrong with this application,
Yeah, I agree with Sue. There's nothing at all wrong with this application. It's a straightforward application. The applicant has explained everything we need to know, so I'm pleased to second the Chair.
Right, thank you. Anybody else wanted to speak on this? In which case then we'll... Councillor Wakeman?
yeah, happy with it.
In which case then we'll move to the vote. All those in favour, please shout. That's carried. Thank you very much. Right, thank you very much. Moving straight on, we're going straight to 4.3, that's 4.2 has been withdrawn. So 4.3 is application 18/013-184. This is Queen Elizabeth Sixth Form Centre, Boothby Meadow School, Cocaine Avenue, Ashbourne, and it's to extend and refurbish the leaching lot, creation of car park and 2 number of passing places to access. I think you'll find there's some late correspondence here, so I'll just let you read the late correspondence before we move on. Thank you, members. Is there any update on this from the office?
The only update, Chair, on this one is as set out on the late representation sheet itself. Just to explain to members what's set out on that sheet, we have received a transport assessment prior to or post the publication of the Planning Committee agenda, which indicates that we know material impact of on the operation of the local highway network at peak times as a result of this development. Essentially, the assessment concludes that the development is in accordance with national and local transport policies. There are no transport or highway reasons to refuse planning permission in this case. Correspondence has also been received from the local highway authority confirming A, that they raised no objections to the officer recommendation, and also that the recommended conditions cover highway safety related matters. Finally, the applicant has asked officers to consider whether condition 6 in the officer's report could be amended to enable non-sport recreational users such as the Rotary Club, Scouts, etc. to be able to use the building in the future. However, we feel that this wouldn't be appropriate at this stage, given that the application has been assessed on the basis that it will provide improved teaching and sporting facilities in association with the use of surrounding controlled land only. If such use was proposed, I think we need to consider the implications of that use in terms of the impact on the access and also the impact on residential of nearby residents. So we don't feel it's appropriate to agree to widen the scope of that condition as part of this application. That would have to be considered as part of a future application if that's the applicant's intention. Happy to take the speakers on this before answering questions.
Thank you, Chris. Right, we've got two speakers on this. The first speaker is Mr. Craig Seller, a local resident, to speak against the application. So I'd like to call. We've got 3 minutes. I'll tell you when you've got 30 seconds left. Thank you.
Okay, so firstly, we'd have to say that we are fully in support of the development of the school and the needs of the school and future demands on Ashbourne footprint. However, our subject of concern is the development of the school, car parking, allocation and the sporting facilities thereof and the use of. The level of the land put the car park effectively at first floor height of our building, which is Townhead Cottage, which you'll see in the photos, and it would give direct views into the front and rear bedrooms if car parking was made available along the boundary. The car park itself creating both noise and car and light pollution, which even today with the informal parking is sometimes unbearable and the level of frequency of disruption. We bought Townhead Cottage approximately 12 months ago with the knowledge that the planning permission originally submitted was rejected, specifically for the location of the building and for the car park itself, which would have significant detriment on the living conditions of the occupiers, and it listed a series of policy references. The car park remains in plans today, identical in scale, volume and proximity, and therefore we feel nothing has changed with that particular part of the application herein. Justification of the car park highlights that it would mitigate current disruption. However, the majority of the parking during the week and a significant proportion of the weekends is its use of the AstroTurf. That also has planning permission, which has restrictions on it. Access to the parking facilities within the main school site north of Green Road shall be made available during the operational hours of the sports facilities, and no vehicles other than the disabled persons shall be parking within the school's south side of Green Road. This being in the interest of highway safety and to ensure the safety and amenity of local residents. In 12 months that we've lived at Townhead Cottage, the car park north of Green Road has never been made available for this purpose, therefore causing the current level of disruption on the parking south. Although not proficient in planning regulations, because we're not, the proposed car park in our view would be contrary to policy HC17. Permission being permitted provided that there are they are intended to meet a specific rural need and cannot be appropriately met at the settlement within the settlement hierarchy. The car park to the north is within the settlement. It's very, very close within walking access and provides all the parking necessary to facilitate the car park and facility itself. In relation to the parking and use by the rugby club, we believe that the conditions and controls set out in the original planning permission for the AstroTurf have set a precedent for the management of disruption and impact of the facilities and their usage in the area for the residents, and specifically in relation to parking and the building usage itself. We would, however, hope that the committee approve the application to improve and extend the school building as per the plan submitted, but reduce the overbearing aspect of the car park, maintaining it to around the current level of 7 parking spaces, but more laid out and allocation for disabled facilities. And the availability of the north car park...
Thank you, Mr. Sellers. That's your 3 minutes. Thank you. Officers want to come back on anything raised by the... I'll take the next speaker first. Right, can I have the next speaker, please, Mr. Garrity, the agent, to speak in favour of the application. You've got 5 minutes, and I'll let you know when you've got 30 seconds left.
Thank you. My name's Scott Garrity, head teacher. My name's Scott Garrity, head teacher at Greenlands Grammar School. I'm here to support our application. We're seeing unprecedented growth in student numbers at our school, which is great, but poses a problem for capacity. Our current student numbers are 1,334, and for September 2019 we'll be admitting 60 more, and we've seen 27 joining this year in the school year. It is due to local housing developments in our catchment, but it's also due to actually the school reputation. We know that we will exceed our capacity of 1,384 in the next 18 months. So if we do not build and expand very soon, we will actually be struggling to take those students. We do not want temporary classrooms. That will simply be money down the drain. We did apply over 2 years ago for what was going to be a sports pavilion, but it was refused. And actually, we thank you for that because it made us think again about our site. And if you know Ashbourne, it's a very tight site. The school is in a very difficult position. And we now come back with an application to use an existing footprint of the building, not to use any green space, and to actually consider our site and what's the best for the student needs. We need more classrooms. This will give us 6 more. There's already 3 in the existing building. This will give us 9 in total in that block. It gives us a new canteen, and it gives us 2 additional sports changing rooms. To fund this, 20% of the money will come from a local sporting club and a national body, the RFU. So we're very pleased that this opportunity is available to collaborate, but it is only 20% of the funding, and obviously in going in with a community project and a community group, we would like to embrace that, and their players are our students. So this is a school building which will actually give use to a local sporting club, but it will be a letting. That is how it's arranged. It's our building, we own it, we manage it, it's our caretakers who will open it and lock it each evening, and it will still be under the lettings guidelines of our school operation. We've considered the problems with the initial application, and we've considered our neighbours, and we do not want to have an ongoing problem with our residents and our local neighbours, so we've actually considered one that suits our needs and suits their needs. We want to recycle, extend and upgrade an existing building, call it a brownfield site. We want to add capacity. We want to formalise the informal parking, which actually was a building site which was used to extend the sixth form centre. That is not meant to be a parking area, but it's become a parking area through need. And we also want to establish 2 passing bays down the side of the local primary school, so that actually we can make it safer for everybody, not just this building when it's built. There are concerns in the application I've seen from people about out-of-hours use, but I will repeat, this is a school letting that would be used, so any sporting group who wanted to use that facility would be under the application as a lettee, and they would follow our guidelines and restrictions. For many of the things that people have raised as concerns, other social events, we do hold social events in school. We have quizzes, FPTAs, we have school shows, we have concerts, but we have a perfectly good school hall and canteen for that. And so we wouldn't see any reason to use another building for such requests. This simply expands the school and makes another addition to what is already a great site. We've not seen building on site since 2003, so in 16 years this is the first opportunity that we've had from funding from Section 106, which is obviously designated for the needs of the students and the local community. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Garrity. Chris, is there anything you want to come from?
Thank you, Chair. A number of points to come back on from in response to the previous, or the first speaker. A number of valid points were made. This is a resubmission of an earlier scheme which was refused, planning permission. The reasons for refusing that application are set out in the officer's reports. First is one reason, but there's 2 strands to that reason for refusal. One was the location of the previous building and its oppressive impact on the occupants of Townhead Cottage. And as the first speaker rightly pointed out, there was a second strand which related to the use of the car park and associated disturbance accessing that new building. This application proposes a new building or remodelling and extension of an existing building on the site, and the activity associated with such use is taken further away from that property. However, it is appreciated there is still a car park extension that will sit very close to that property. However, we feel that giving careful consideration to the levels, members will have noted from the site visit today that it is a sloping site, and there's an opportunity to cut the car park area, or the extended car park area, into the slope of the site to try and prevent or mitigate any adverse impacts of light pollution on the occupants of the Townhead Cottage. You'll note conditions 4 of the officer's reports, which also proposes car park management, a scheme for car park management. The school does intend to erect car park barriers, and there's opportunity to consider how the extended car park or part of the car park is used. So on match days, if there's a requirement for additional car parking spaces, perhaps think about when that part of the car park is opened up and perhaps not that it's not used during on social hours to try and minimise the impact on the occupants of town head cottage. The head teacher at the schools is already confirmed that they're happy to utilise the main school car park off the Green Road to service this building once the new car park reaches capacity. I think it's also worth pointing out that on match days the area is used informally for parking at the moment, so there is no control over the number of vehicles that can use that area in association with the use of the sports fields as a rugby facility or other sports facility. The previous speaker did mention controls are in place in relation to the street surf facility, but that is a lit facility, and there is opportunity for that facility to be used late into the evenings. But there are no controls or no restrictions in relation to the general use of the school buildings or the sports fields on that particular site. We're satisfied that the design of the building, the result of the building as remodelled and extended, is a positive response to the site and its surroundings. A bold design will be faced in a mixture of materials, mainly red brick, which so that the building has some affinity with buildings in the surrounding area. And we're happy that with appropriate controls in relation to the use of the car park and including the layout of spaces, that the impacts on the occupants of nearby properties won't be so severely impacted so as to warrant refusal on such grounds, hence why we're recommending approval of this application as presented. Happy to take questions at this stage.
Right, members, questions? Councillor Purdy. Councillor Paul Richardson.
It happens a lot.
Same ward.
I think I'm married him actually. Just could somebody point out on the map where this car park is that people keep mentioning that that gets locked and is not used and should be used. I can't quite locate it.
You'll struggle to see it on that plan because it's to the north of, you see the houses that line the Green Road. So the school's on two sides. So this is the school site to the south of the Green Road, where the main school site is on the north side.
All right, I see. Yes, I've got it.
So it's beyond where the cursor is, basically.
Right, thank you.
To the west.
And is it part of the conditions that won't be locked, so it can be used if we get to the maximum number of numbers for car parking? I know we were just saying there was a maximum number.
The benefits of this application is such that once the car park reaches capacity, there will be no opportunities to park on the site. So participants in sporting activities or visitors to the school site will have to find alternative parking, whether that's public car parks or on-street parking or the other parking area on the main school site. The applicant has offered up the use of the main school site car parking as part of this application, as part of agreeing a car park management plan in association with the use of the new facility. That's something that we seek to secure as part of discharging that condition.
Thank you. May I ask one more, Chair? We talked about lighting when we went on the site visit. Is there any chance of putting conditions on to make sure that the lighting is not intrusive to the properties that are around if we do go along with this?
That's a really valid point. There is no lighting proposed as part of this application. With the view that we have control over such developments in the future. There are other forms of lighting in the form of sort of low-level bollards where that may result in some impact on the locality. So I think if members were minded, they could impose a condition that the permission does not convey any authorisation to erect any lighting or install any lighting on site without our prior written approval. That is a condition that you could recommend should you be minded to approve the application.
Okay.
Councillor Archer.
Mr. Garrity mentioned the issue of how the school would keep control of the site, and in terms of out-of-hours used by the rugby club, that would be controlled by school guidelines. is there any more detail on what those guidelines might be in terms of what they're planning, in terms of what they're saying the guidelines should be for out of hours use by the rugby club?
The application as presented proposes a dual use of the building, so what we're essentially allowing is a D1 and a D2 use. So overall the building would have I'd argue, a sui generis use. There are currently no proposals to restrict the hours of operation of a particular building. If members were concerned about potential activities late in the evening and the impacts that they could have on nearby residents, they could legitimately, in my view, impose a condition that perhaps after a short period of time, after training events or events at the school, that the building's closed 2 hours after those events, or you could set a time if you wanted to, if you were concerned about the impacts of the use of the building on nearby properties.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. I've got two questions. The first is about the 15-metre barrier of free space between the car park, proposed car park, and the house. Are there any conditions that can be applied to mitigate any light pollution or any other sort of pollution along there, for example, planting or similar?
We are proposing a condition that secures a landscaping scheme. I think with a condition, an extra condition, as Councillor Pauly suggested, relating to lighting, that will address any potential light pollution in that area. Just to clarify, it's a 5 metre buffer between the rear boundary or the side boundary of Town Head Cottage and the car park area. This combination of things, it's getting the landscaping scheme right, but also getting the levels right for the sides, so that the car parking areas is built into the slope rather than sitting proud and at a high level, so that car parking and disturbance associated with that would have a greater impact on the occupants of that property.
Thank you. And my second question is about policy PD7 concerning climate change. Does that apply? Do the conditions in that policy apply to this building, particularly the green environmental assessment method that is proposed for commercial buildings over 1,000 square metres?
Those provisions do apply, and the applicant has had regard to that policy as part of this application. They are proposing sustainable construction methods, so we're utilising the existing building on site. We're able to utilise foundations and building materials associated with the construction of that building. We're also proposing to source local materials, and where they can't source local materials, to not source them from anywhere other than outside the UK. They have considered microgeneration and renewable energy installations, but as pointed out on site today, budget constraints and difficulties making the development stack up has meant that they haven't been able to stretch to renewable energy installations on this particular build.
Thank you. Councillor Leeson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd just like to raise the out of hours issue. That I'd like to see some more conditions put in and more strict time use of the building if it's approved. Like it's been suggested, a couple of hours after the last match. And also I'd like to see the car park size reduced dramatically, because when most of the sporting events are happening, there's nobody at school, so I can't see why the parking can't be used in the school site that he's got now. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Bryan.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with Councillor Lees with regards to the time and usage of the building, and I think that the officer's suggestion of 2 hours after the end of the match is very sensible, and I'd like that including. So if that's something we can move for this application, I'd like to do so.
Does that find a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Hughes. Councillor Wakeman.
Yes, the only thing I'm concerned on is the entrance that we went down today when the cars were coming up and down. they've said that they're going to put 2 passing places in. But how are they going to man that at the entrance when it's full? You can have them coming in and going out. That's what I'm a bit concerned about.
Just to come back on that point, the Highway Authority and the transport assessment that accompanies this application indicates that even without the passing places that there wouldn't be so significant an intensification in use that there would have to be any upgrading of that access. The applicant has proposed these lay-bys, and the local highway authority see that as an improvement on the existing situation. And with the lay-bys, they're happy that it provides an appropriate solution so as to not be able to recommend refusal of the application on highway safety grounds.
Councillor Wayne.
Thank you, Chair. When we visited the site earlier on, a couple of things I was a bit disappointed about. One of them was in this area of sustainability, that you've got a marvellous flat roof on that premise and it isn't being utilised in any way for any sort of regeneration of electricity. And also it's going to have gas-fired heating systems. Would there be any opportunity to revisit Section 106 money? I don't know how much they showed when it was discussed earlier on, but we should be looking forward to the sustainability of these premises for the future. And also, it was alluded to that the car park was used quite a bit for sixth formers, and I noticed 4 or 5 sixth formers driving away in the vehicles on their own. And obviously we've got a big climate change issue from promoted by young people, and I'd like to know what the school are doing to try and get the young people out of the cars and maybe travel to school together. I'm not trying to say young people shouldn't drive the vehicles, but I'd like to see some more sustainability put into the building. Thank you.
Councillor Slab.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with Councillor Wayne that I was quite surprised this afternoon when I questioned what heating systems the school would be using, and they said gas-fired central heating. I thought, oh no. All the choices they could have made was electric, even is part of its power from renewables increasing every week with turbines, etc. And also solar panels, and also deep water. But gas fire is probably the worst thing you could have. And only 10 days ago, this council passed the emergency climate change policy, and now we see an education authority going completely opposite way. And I wonder what the students think. All the students who protested out in the streets about climate change, I think of what's going on here at Craig's. They should really be altering this policy, and I wish the officers would point them in the right direction. I don't know, there's no proper policy, I know, but could we have negotiate again with them to try and get this turned around? That's all.
John.
I think Councillor Slack highlights one of the dilemmas that we've got. We've got a policy, but it's a little bit short, perhaps, in putting flesh on the bones as to how we're going to go about improving our environmental credentials. I think, without wishing to put the hat on of the local education authority and the school in this case, this would be a project where finance is fairly critical. It's offering significant benefits to the local school and the rugby club as well. And actually, although in the long term those environmental measures may reduce bills, they are an upfront cost that probably this project finds quite difficult to bear, but it is something we're very actively looking into.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. I understand that there are a number of electricity companies that are willing to buy electricity from from solar panels on roofs, and indeed willing to pay for the installation of those solar panels. And perhaps the school could take into account that and investigate the possibility of putting solar panels on its roof.
Councillor Wall.
I'm going back to the issue with the car parking. As the first speaker was saying, he's got no objections to the actual extension of the school itself, and it's the provision of the car parking which is going to be a bit overbearing, and wondered if that could be downsized as we have stated. And plus, there is a height barrier, but will there be a proper barrier that will be shut at the time of the closing of the whole venue and through weekends when it's not being used?
Just to clarify on that particular point, the school have confirmed that there will be new gated access to that area, and also there will be car park barriers. So as part of agreeing a management plan of the car park and how it's used in relation to both school activities or school use and use by the rugby club, that's something that we can control or agree to control with the school as part of discharging that condition.
Right, thank you, members. Councillor Archer.
In relation to the sustainability issue, I completely agree with the concerns that have been raised, but working in education as well, I understand the difficulties of finance and budgets that schools have. So I'd just like to reiterate what Councillor Wayne said in terms of I don't think we can necessarily have an extra burden on the school to find the funding for that, but if there's anything that can be done to find extra money from the S106 funding, bearing in mind the amount of development that's coming into Ashbourne, then that is something I would hope, if possible, we could consider. In relation to the car parking, from my experience of that site, which I know pretty well, there are certain times when there is a big demand of car parking for the rugby club, particularly Sunday mornings when the junior rugby's on. So I understand the concerns raised in terms of how close the car park is in proximity to the resident's house, and the idea of moving the car parking more over to the school site could solve that problem. But I would have a few concerns about the fact there's a lot of young children that may be crossing Green Road there on a Sunday morning, and I wonder if that's something we can consider in terms of making sure there's maybe somebody there to patrol that crossing as people are arriving, just to make sure if that change is made, if there's more parking on over the Green Road site, that consideration is taken for the safety of children, particularly on the Sunday morning when it is very busy there for junior rugby.
Thank you. Right, we'll move into debate now. Anybody like to? Councillor Paul.
Yes, well, I didn't move my suggestion that we have some conditions on the amount of, if we do agree to this, on the car parking area, and I would like there to be a condition that it's low key lighting, low down on bollards or some other system. I move that, so I don't know if anyone wants to second that.
So that fine is seconded. Stuart just seconded.
Yeah.
I am still, I think I agree with Councillor Bull. I think we've got rather a lot of car parking. I would prefer it if it moved away from the boundary and perhaps a smaller amount of parking so that it could be used for people who are disabled. And that, I know we have got some disabled parking, but just to cut it down a little, I feel it's too much and too near that property.
Thank you. I think what we need is some clarification over the addition of these conditions and the low level lighting. So I don't know whether Jim wants to just come in on those 2 points.
Yes, Chair. In terms of the debate we've heard to date, I think certainly adding a condition in terms of the applicant being required to submit a lighting scheme to the local planning authority for approval, that's certainly something that would be reasonable in planning terms. And I know that Councillor Bright previously in the questions raised the issue around restricting the hours of operation of these particular buildings and putting a cap on that usage of no later than 2 hours after the use of the sporting fields are finished. So I think both of those are reasonable conditions should members choose to take those forward in a motion.
Thank you very much. Any more people for debate? I'm looking for somebody to move the recommendation as set out in the report. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. I'm able to move those two recommendations. I can see why there's the temptation to try and restrict the amount of cars in the car park, but I've also used those facilities on multiple occasions with my children when they're at primary school, and I've seen how people park in those areas and utilise the grass areas, and they're not particularly careful about how they park and where they park. So I wouldn't be able to support a reduction in the car parking numbers. I think you might even not have enough, to be honest, which is why it's good to hear that you've got the usage of the car park in the Quegs main site, which it could be an overflow. So I'm prepared to move the first two of those, but I can't support anything to reduce the car parking.
Thank you. I think what we need to do now is just take stock. So you're going to move the recommendation with the addition of the other two amendments. Now, does that find a seconder?
I'll second that, Chair, yeah. I think with the self-visit today, and we're looking at many times, we know as Ashbourne members the difficulty with car parking, etc. But at the same time, we do need more classrooms in Ashbourne. There's more development in Ashbourne, more to come, unfortunately. So I'm happy to support the recommendation.
Thank you very much. Right. That has been moved and seconded for approval with the addition of the two other items. All those in favour, please show. All those against? Abstentions? That motion is carried. Thank you. Right, moving swiftly on. Application 4.4, which is conversion and extension of stone barn to form a dwelling and removal of redundant agricultural building at Rev to the Old Vicarage, Ashbourne, no Grassington. And we have one speaker on and Miss Tina Humphries on behalf of the applicant to speak in favour of the application. You've got 5 minutes and indicate when you've got 30 seconds left.
Of the applicants for this site. The site is situated on one of the main routes through to Whittington. The views of the site when approaching from the south are the Linear Stone Barn, and the view approaching from the north is the large unsightly agricultural shed currently used for storage. The overall size being about 285 square metres in footprint. The stone barn needs some repair structurally, and if left vacant, it will inevitably deteriorate over time. The stone barn is a characterful agricultural building with traditional features worthy of retaining. After meeting Mr. and Mrs. Beardmore to discuss their plans for the barn, it was clear that their vision for the barn would be of a high standard and spec, something that would not lose the existing character of the barn as it is today. The conversion of the stone barn is a modest layout for a dwelling consisting of an open plan, kitchen, dining and living space, with 2 bedrooms, one with ensuite. The living space with a vaulted ceiling, showcasing the character of the barn by retaining as many of the original trusses as possible. The conversion retains the character of the linear stone barn, keeping all the original openings, such as the barn door and small windows, especially on the south side, as this is the main elevation seen when coming into Brossington. A modest number of openings would not allow a lot of light, natural light into the building, deemed a very dark space to live, with very little natural light. To the east of the stone barn, the old metal sheet roofing will be replaced with matching slate tile roofing to match the existing stone barn. This will help to enhance the view when approaching from the main road south. To make the most of the views to the west and bring in much needed light into the main living space, there will be glazing to the western gable end. This glazing will be recessed into the stone about 200mm to help retain the original character of the barn, and it will not be visible from either the north or the south. To the west there are very few public footpaths, and these are set lower down into the valley. A small extension will be set back from the main road and sit further west into the site, and is accessed from the barn via a small glass link. The existing agricultural shed abuts right up to the barn to the north, and this proposal will open up this elevation, revealing more of the stone barn. The proposed extension will have appearance of a separate agricultural building from the main barn. There will be minimal openings our glazing to the west, which will be recessed also and will provide extensive views across the landscape beyond. The overall size of the proposed extension is 660 square metres. This will have less of an impact on the site than the current 285 square metres of the metal shed. The proposed material for the extension of dark grey standing seam metal cladding will enhance the character and appearance of the site and its surrounding area. This will reflect the agricultural history of the site also. This will help to provide a clear separation between the existing character of the barn and the new proposed extension. The applicants are excited at the prospect of greatly enhancing this prominent site on the southern edge of Brassington. However, we believe the applicants are being unduly rigid in their application of conversion of farm buildings. In the supplementary planning document, it states proposals for new windows, doors and openings, etc., to historically blank elevations will generally be resisted. However, this does not impose a blanket restriction on them. We feel that officers have not exercised enough flexibility in their judgment in this particular case. The report acknowledges that the existing historic barn makes a significant contribution to the rural character of the area, but fails to acknowledge that the removal of the steel frame building will greatly benefit the site. In summary, we feel the inclusion of the proposed western gable end is pivotal to the entire scheme and will not adversely affect the character of the building, and we would request that committee members take a more balanced view and recognise the improvements that the scheme as a whole will make to the entire site when reaching their decision. I would also just like to mention that the applicants attended a parish council meeting and there were no objections on this. Also
30 seconds left.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just want to come back on it.
Thank you, Chair. Just come back on a couple of points there. Members have obviously been to site this afternoon and have appreciated the full extent of alterations and extensions that are proposed as part of this application. Although there are extensions, quite significant extensions to this building and alterations, we are generally comfortable with those. The main or sole issue really is the feature window in the western gable end of the building. Members will have appreciated the importance of the existing stone building on site. It's an important and limited resource within our landscape. It's a traditional field barn, traditional construction, which retains its original character and its original appearance with some blocking up of openings. Mention was made of the council having a blanket ban on new openings to blank elevations. That's not the case in this particular instance. We have explored alternative openings in the western or west-facing gable end, and more traditional openings in terms of their form and general appearance. The issue with this application is that the window opening that's proposed in that gable end is of an appearance that is disrespectful to the character and appearance of that original building. It floats above floor level and it has a triangular section at high level. That's not typical of a traditional opening to a traditional barn like this, hence why we're recommending refusal of the application as submitted. Happy to take questions at this stage.
Right, member, over to questions. Councillor Hughes.
Yes, thank you. Just one question on the opening. If with the barn, with the proposed coach entrance, the coach entrance that has been proposed by the council, would that mean raising the land outside so that it's the same height as the land as the floor inside?
We'd expect that opening to be taken down to finished floor level in the building. So would it, at the moment the opening is shown to be floating as like a stone plinth underneath. So we expect that to be taken to ground level, so it looks like a form of functional opening to that building.
Yeah, mine was in a similar thing. If it was in matching and take away the triangle a bit, and to the floor level, then you would find that acceptable. So is this something that is to be gone away for them to just come back and do and take away the triangle a bit of the window?
Can I take this, Chair? Yeah.
I think it's fair to say that officers in this particular case have tried to engage in negotiations with the applicant, and the sole purpose of that engagement, whilst the application's been in process, is to reduce the scale and form of that opening in the gable elevation. We've been successful in those negotiations. The applicants wanted to pursue the determination of the application as submitted. It's open to members, obviously, to take a view that we should defer this, but my advice would be that actually what we should do is determine the application, because that's what the applicant wants in this instance. They have an opportunity to submit further proposals to us in due course that take your advice on board should they prove unsuccessful tonight, and indeed should they choose to go to appeal. So that's what I suggest.
Councillor Archer.
If the committee was to side on, in this case, with the applicant, because of the points made just there, is there a danger that that sets a precedent for future developments? So if we felt in this case, because of where it is and it's not very visible to people, therefore we feel we can make an exception of this case, could that have an impact on future proposed barn developments and set a precedent for that?
Always a little bit wary to get involved in a discussion around precedents, but I think you give a clear message to the public that you aren't applying the policies that you have on barn conversions in a fair and consistent manner. Barns of this nature, as Chris rightly pointed out, are a limited resource within the landscape. There are plenty of successful barn conversions out there where we've applied the policy successfully and people have got good places to live. I think it is important that you are consistent.
Councillor Slack.
Thank you, Chair. During this application on which is on this particular doorway, I know the officers have tried very, very hard to persuade the applicant to accept amendments on this doorway. And John's just explained that if we deferred it, we wouldn't get any worse. So, reluctantly, I'm going to move for refusal. I don't want to do this, but we're not to the position where I think there's no alternative but to move for refusal. So, I'd like to see a deferment, but it's not possible to get. Thank you, Chair.
Does that find a second? Councillor Lees?
Yeah, I second that.
Thank you very much. Right, so we'll move into debate then. Any other members wishing to speak? Councillor Gawley?
Just a question is, it's a clarification because I don't know the answer. When you've got a barn, and looking at it today, it really was in a very poor state, that barn, and yet we're trying to keep those resources. So you've got a kind of balance going on, haven't you, between deciding whether to allow a window like that and saving a building, or losing a building perhaps. So what powers have we got to make sure those buildings don't collapse completely if we don't agree something like this?
I think it's unlikely that even if this scheme doesn't proceed, that another party wouldn't come forward with a proposal for this site. You'll have noted from the plans that have been seen on site today, we're not opposed to seeing the replacement of the existing more modern structure on site, and that offers quite a lot of flexibility over and above a typical barn conversion. So, like I say, I don't think there's any particular danger that we would lose this building. I think it will be incorporated into a successful scheme in the future.
Members, anybody else? No? In which case it's been moved and seconded for refusal. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. That's carried. Thank you very much. Right, the next application is number 4.5. This is residential development up to 12 dwellings in outline at Matlock Transport North Lane, Darnydale. We have got one speaker on this, Mr. Richard Piggott. I'd just like to draw yourself attention to some late representation, so while you read that, we'll carry on. Thank you. Okay, members?
Yes.
So, okay, members, is there any update on this from the officers?
No, there's just, I'll say there's just like this correspondence from the applicants querying the conditions 13, conditions 11 and 13, and whether they are inviting excessive in terms of the development. It's the view of officers that they're not, that they provide assistance to the developer at an early stage in identifying what the constraints of the trees are around the site and the best mechanisms to protect them. I'll just add that members have been on site today and looked at the indicative proposals in context. They were allowed to appreciate the significant landscaping treatment around the boundary of the site and the proposals as part of the application to further improve landscaping to the northern boundary of the site. I'll take questions.
Right, we've just got one speaker on this, so we'll let the speaker. Mr. Richard Piggott, the agent, to speak in favour of the application. You've got 5 minutes. I'll let you know when you've 30 seconds left. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, for the opportunity to speak today. I commend the officer report for its detailed analysis of the proposal. Following the refusal of the previous application in 2017, we have worked hard with the applicant to address the reasons for refusal and commissioned a number of third-party surveys to address concerns about trees, ecology, drainage and the loss of an employment site. Members will have seen for themselves that the site is far from ideal for its existing use as a haulage yard. Whilst demand for industrial sites remains firm in the district, they have to be conveniently located to attract new investment, and that is clearly not the case here. Unusually for an application like this, there have been no objections from local residents. Whilst the Parish Council have raised a few queries about specific details, these can all be properly assessed at the reserve matter stage, and crucially, the principle of housing is supported by the Parish Council. I would like to now remind you all of the benefits of the scheme. The site is located within the settlement boundary, lies close to local services and amenities, and will make beneficial use of an underused site. This is clearly in the interest of good town planning. The site is located adjacent to residential uses, and the site layout plan shows how 12 drives can fit onto the site without detriment to the character and appearance of the area. There will be some benefit to local residents with the cessation of the use of Northwood Lane by articulated lorries and trailers. The proposal will deliver 12 new houses, including 3 affordable dwellings, to meet the needs of the area, as specified by the Council's housing officer. Whilst there are constraints identified with respect to developing the site, including drainage, trees, contamination, etc., it is considered that a scheme can be developed which addresses those constraints, and this can be assessed at the reserve matter stage when a detailed design and layout for the site is provided. In conclusion, the proposal has not generated any objections, and the officer's report deals clearly with all the various issues. You are therefore invited to follow the advice of the officers and approve the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Piggott. The officers want to come back on anything raised?
As Mr. Piggott said, as far as officers have appraised the site now, with the information that is submitted with this current application, that the applicant has now adequately addressed the reasons for refusal to approve this scheme, and therefore the officer's recommendation is now to approve it, but with conditions to address the actual details of the site development.
Right, members, questions? No? In which case we'll move to debate. Councillor Slack.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we've been to the site today, and as Gareth just said, it was previously outside the local plan, but now it's addressed this, and it's inside. It's approved. I'd like to move it for approval, but for the simple reason that the site is 12 houses and the evenly spread, it's landscape, it's perfect, and one of the main things, affordable housing, is the affordable housing on site and also affordable housing grant, so everything's really in place, and I'm pleased to move it, Chair.
Does that find a second? Councillor Waitman, yeah, second. Anybody else wishing to speak on it? No? In which case then we'll go to vote. It's been moved and seconded for approval. All those in favour, please show your hand. That's unanimous, so that's approved. Thank you very much. Right, members. Application item number 4.6. This is direction of dwelling and land adjacent to Jenner, Bennett Lane, Hackney. We have got one speaker on this. Just used a update from the officer.
No, so updates, Chair.
Right, in which case then, please, Mr. Oldfield, come to the front. You've got 5 minutes, and I'll let you know when you've got 30 seconds left.
Mr. Chair, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Joe Oldfield of Oldfield Design. We are the agents for PD Properties, a small company of builders who create quality small developments locally. The background to the application is contained within your officer's report. Our client's brief was to provide a 4-bedroom dwelling with a traditional design to the front onto Burnett Lane, and a more contemporary approach with lots of natural light to the rear overlooking the valley. The slope of the site, landscaping, government residential space standards and the impact of neighbouring properties were all taken into account. We have been in close contact with the planning officers all the way through the planning process, especially latterly, and believe that the whole scheme was now acceptable to the planning officer. We've been informed during the process that the application received a balanced recommendation of approval and a delegated decision issued within the statutory 8-week period, with the determination date 2 weeks prior to the expiry date of the outline approval. We were then told that due to objections, the application would need to go in front of the planning committee for determination. We consider this to be a fair course of action. However, to our surprise, we are now told that the application is being recommended for refusal because the 2017 local plan puts the site just outside the new settlement boundary in Matlock. Our clients now face the possibility that they could lose outline approval on this plot of land because of a set of unfortunate circumstances which transpired to work against us in a number of ways. We were advised that a full planning application would be a smoother way forward. Had we been advised to submit a reserved matters application, then the outline approval would still be alive. We were not alerted to the release of the new local plan policy and the potential implications this may have. The fact that both the local and European elections pushed the committee date back until now. Had the meeting been in April, as it should have been, this application would have been considered before the expiry date of the outline approval. And the fact that the new development framework now shows the plot just outside the Matlock development area, yet it is still surrounded by properties on all sides and is considered to be a sustainable site. Had this site situated on the edge of a smaller property within the Derbyshire Dales, it would have been approved by the local authority under the same policy. We fully understand the official position of the planning team. However, we do feel strongly that in this case is unique due to the change in policy and the way the set of circumstances have stacked up against our clients over the past few months. The design has now been agreed between our clients and the planning officer. The approval of this application would not be setting a precedent, as these are totally exceptional circumstances. outline planning approval has already been granted. We've worked side by side with the planning officer throughout the process and believe we have come to a agreeable solution. We are able to provide a planned construction process in order to alleviate all concerns from neighbours and residents regarding construction traffic, etc. We will in fact be improving the condition of the lane and will undertake a prior photographic survey to maintain our responsibility of any constructional impacts. My client runs a very small development company and have been building quality new properties for over 10 years. If required, we can provide examples of the high standard of work they do. They bought this plot in good faith with outline planning approval. However, the consequences will be disastrous for them and their tradesmen they employ if full planning approval is not granted. As you can see from the officer's report, they fully support the application in terms of the property itself. The only outstanding issue is the introduction of the new local plan. We ask you kindly to make an exception to this policy and grant approval.
30 seconds left.
As this case is without doubt out of the ordinary and exceptional. Thank you all for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Elford. You left the
Thank you, Chair. Without wanting to second guess what member questions will be around this particular application, I think Mr. Oldfield has explained in quite a lot of detail there the rather strange and largely unique set of circumstances that have taken us to where we are. Officers have recommended refusal for this application because the local plan comes first in the assessment of this scheme. But if members want to ask a series of structured questions around where the harm lies with this, we'd be happy to answer those to help you come to a balanced judgment.
Right, thank you very much. So now we're open to questions. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. Can I ask whether policy HC1, location of housing development, applies? In particular, the promoting the effective reuse of land by encouraging housing development, including redevelopment, infill, conversion of existing dwellings, etc., but particularly infill. Page 72.
I think the answer to that is yes and no. What you have to first do is have a housing policy which recognises your settlement and tries to protect those areas outside of the settlement framework boundaries. Beyond that, then you also apply general policies that look at utilising brownfield sites first, looking to infill opportunities. Because Mr. Oldfield pointed out, we have a strange situation in terms of there's a subtle difference between how we treat the larger settlements and how we treat the smaller settlements. So Matlock has a settlement framework boundary, and land outside that settlement framework boundary gets treated as if it's countryside in pure policy terms. When you're talking about smaller settlements, take a Bonsall or a Brassington, where we don't have the same tightness and scale of settlement, then we look more creatively at finding infill opportunities and consolidation around those settlements. So both policies sort of interact with one another.
Councillor Slack.
Thank you, Chair. I do feel very sorry for the applicant in this situation which has developed over the different elections and changing boundaries, etc. If the committee was minded to approve this against officers' recommendations, would there be any repercussions in any way?
I think, Chair, it's fair to say that members are allowed to take into account all of those material considerations that come into play in considering this application. The history of having previously approved a development on this site is one of those material considerations, and it is an unfortunate set of circumstances in terms of the timing of what would have otherwise been a delegated decision, and then the fact that the elections came into play in delaying consideration of the application. I think you can also legitimately, you've been out on site, you've seen how the land lies in terms of where the extent of built development is. You also have to consider, one, what the harm of this development would be, how sustainable it would be, and whilst officers quite legitimately get concerned about the issue of are you setting a precedent for other people to propose development outside of the settlement framework boundaries, you can legitimately think about, well, how likely is it that we would be faced with a similar set of circumstances on any sort of regular basis? I personally think it's quite unlikely that that will occur. So I don't think there's any sort of heavy hand from us here in terms of saying you shall come down on one particular side on this. You can legitimately weigh all of those things in the balance and come to a judgment.
Councillor Morley.
Yeah, on the surface, I also feel rather sorry for the applicant here, but I have got a couple of questions. When we were looking at the local plan, or the advisory committee was looking at the local plan, we spent months and months and months considering all the actual maps of the area, and I think most of the areas that were eventually settled on were on those initial maps, and I would have thought that an agent and a building company would perhaps have kept an eye on them at the same time. So one question I've got is, and I don't know if this can be answered, but when was this land booked? Are we looking at a time prior to this actual outline planning permission being given, or very near to the initial stages of the consultation on the actual local plan, when it might not have been completely obvious to anybody that this boundary would finish up as it was, because it does have a reflection. The agent has said that they're in a position where they bought the land because the outline planning permission was there, but were they aware of what was going on with the local plan negotiations? Because that might have had some kind of I don't know, kind of action on what they were going to finally do. I feel sorry for them. I feel that this is a very difficult decision, but on the other hand, we need to know all the facts, and I don't know that.
Thank you, Chair. My understanding from conversations with the applicants and their agent is that they bought the site with outline planning permission in good faith, thinking that they could then, come up with a creative design to make best use of the site. I'd like to sit here and claim that the general public are all aware of what happens in a local plan process in terms of how we come about setting the settlement framework boundaries, but I think that too would be misleading. I think there is some engagement with that, and certainly the agents that regularly engage with us would be aware of that process, but that doesn't mean that everybody is aware of the ramifications of us looking at settlement framework boundaries and revising policies. And perhaps, given that the site had a permission, to the contrary, they might have expected that site would logically be within the settlement framework boundary, but as I say, it's a process that's already happened.
Okay.
Councillor Archer.
As somebody new to the council and this committee, and who wasn't involved in these sort of agreements to the local plan, what were the main reasons why this area was not included in the settlement framework? Is it possible to summarise that? Why it wasn't included? It's probably a very large question. It just doesn't.
Yeah, and I wasn't directly involved in those discussions, I'm afraid. But I mean, you will go through a process in terms of looking at how densely developed a particular area is and how close it is to the core of a settlement as the settlement pattern gets more dispersed around the fringes of the settlement, you have to come up with a line on the ground that you think is logical based on landscape, topography and everything else. Sometimes those lines are easier to draw than they are in other cases, but that's the process we go through.
Councillor Bull.
Yeah, I'm just looking back on the history of this. Obviously, it states on here it's 2016 when the erection and outline was granted, and then in 2017 it was the erection of the dwelling was refused. So, is this a reapplication under a full rather than reserved matters, and that's the reason of this decline now and refusal? Where does that bear in mind?
That's
from the
right,
others?
yes. There were clearly discussions that were held, and those discussions were held in good faith, where it was felt that promoting a full application would give the neighbours a clear picture as to what was proposed. It also allows you, if there are restraining conditions on the outline, to look at all of those issues again. With hindsight, it would have been far wiser, given the way that the local plan situation has affected our assessment of this, for it to be a reserved matters. If it had been a reserved matters application, it would still be a live application, and we could consider it on the basis of the former grant of outline permission, rather than taking the hard policy line we have to when we are granting a new permission on the site.
Any more questions, members? No? In which case we'll move into debate. Anybody like to? Councillor Bryan.
Thanks, Chair. I've been listening to what the officers have said, and I think from the hard point of view, the officers have come down with a decision to refuse because the local plan states that we have to. But in this case, I feel that it could have. We just talked about the fact the line could have so easily been drawn around the existing site. It seems to be just the way that the line has been drawn. There's no malice involved. So, John said it, John Bradby said it, the harm is low in this instance. We can see there's houses dotted all around it. It's not a greenfield site as such. From the site meeting, I recall that the applicant is prepared to keep all the trees in place, which will give it a very, very well sheltered position from any views. Same sustainability is good. It's in Matlock. It's at the top of the hill, but it's you'd be very fit walking up and down to it. And the potential for setting a precedent because of all the different events involved in this, I think, are incredibly unlikely, almost impossible. So I'm reluctantly having to move against the officer's recommendation of refusal, and I'd like to say that we go against your recommendation and we approve this application.
Yeah, right. What we need is a few reasons. I'm sure in discussion with John, you might have to call it a few.
Kind of attempts to. So a balancing act that I performed in my head as a member of this planning application is that the harm is low to the area, the visual appearance on the view of the building. The sustainability is good. Is that enough? Or? Yeah.
I think you also stated. Sorry, you also stated that you didn't feel it was likely to set a precedent for other similar proposals, and I think legitimately from the debate, members are having some regard to the previous history, having found this an acceptable site for development.
I'm happy with that as reasons for going against your officer's recommendation.
I'll let Councillor Wakeman to that. Second, yeah.
Yep.
Councillor Archie.
Yeah, because the recommendation is for refusal, would there have been conditions associated with this planning application which we don't know about?
Yes, if members approve this scheme contrary to officer recommendation, there will need to be conditions imposed on the development. In such circumstances, the normal route of things is that members delegate authority to myself to come up with a suitable list of conditions. There'll be some obvious ones that are already there in the report in terms of what the Highway Authority wants, what the Drainage Authority want, but other conditions such as controlling site levels, materials and other things would be conditions that we would fashion and put on the member decision.
Do the proposal in a second agree to the proposal delegated to John? Yeah.
Yes, Chair, I'm happy to accept delegated decision on all those matters.
Yes, I accept it as well.
Thank you, members. So it's been proposed and seconded to go against officers' recommendations for refusal, so for approval. All those in favour, please show. So that is approved. Thank you.
Hello. She's coming. She's downstairs. Yes, we're chatting.
Thank you very much, and welcome back, Councillor Froggatt. We're now moving on to item 4.7. This is application number 19/00485, section 106 modifications. This is lease file, Winerstone Road, Ashbourne. This is a proposed modification of the section 106 agreement dated the 30th of December 2015 to amend the terms of the affordable housing provision and to provide provision for all off-site sporting contributions. We have got one speaker on this. Just wondered if there's any update from the officer.
There's no updates on this application, Chair.
Well, in which case then we'll move to the speaker, and it's Councillor Jane Harris from Ashbourne Town Council. You have 3 minutes, and I'll tell you when you've got the third hour right. In which case then I'll keep quiet.
Right, Chair, members of the committee. It was resolved to object to the modification of the S106. Members feel that there is a need for affordable housing in Ashbourne. Thank you.
Well, that was one of the briefest speakers we've had tonight. Thank you very much for that, Mrs. Harris. Office wants to come back on that issue raised.
I'll come back on that point, Chair, in that this application does actually deliver affordable housing in Ashbourne. Just to revisit the history a little bit, members will recall in March an item presented to committee where we looked at the layout of this particular development and the provision of affordable housing on site. The original proposal was for provision on site and an off-site provision towards affordable housing. The original section 106 agreement had a clause in it whereby if there was no interest in the affordable units by a registered provider, that the developer could make a full off-site contribution towards affordable housing. So that money would be spent on affordable housing across the entire Derbyshire Dales district. Well, the developer didn't want to do that. They wanted to look at creative ways of trying to deliver some affordable housing on the site for residents of Ashbourne or people in the local area. So what they offered up was 7 units at 0 cost to a housing provider, and this application seeks to amend the terms of the original section 106 to enable that to happen, and also to enable an enhanced off-site contribution towards affordable housing, and also a contribution towards a local infrastructure project, in this case the new sports pavilion project in Ashbourne. So it delivers benefits in terms of an enhanced off-site contribution towards affordable housing, it delivers affordable housing on the site, and it also delivers contribution towards a sports project as well. So there are a lot of benefits associated with this particular proposal. Happy to take questions.
Right, members, questions? Councillor Ball.
Yeah, right. I'm just going to try and take this back into understanding it my way. So what you're saying, they're what they want to do, the 7 affordable houses that was going to be done and sold as affordable houses by the developer, he wants to lend them over now to a housing company, plus put other assessment money towards affordable housing off-site and giving extra to the pavilion. Have I got that looking right at what you're saying in this bit?
Broadly speaking, yes. It delivers an enhanced off-site contribution in lieu of delivery on site, but it also ensures delivery on site of 7 units and a sports contribution as well.
That's large.
Just in reference to the money that's being allocated towards the sports pavilion, could I just ask how the amount of 71,573 has been arrived at? And bearing in mind that that pavilion is a really important and urgently needed project in Ashbourne, because the pavilion it's replacing really is not fit for purpose, and I believe the funding isn't quite there yet to start work on the new pavilion. Is there any way that amount of funding could be increased to enable the pavilion group who are trying to raise the funds to get to their fund limits that they need to start the project?
Yes, thank you, Chair. A chance just to explain to members how Section 106s work. There are quite a few new members on the committee. When we seek contributions through 106 agreements, they have to be reasonably related in scale and kind to the developments that's proposed. Now, we have emerging policy guidance which has a calculator set within it for what would be required to contribute to off-site sports pitches. This is the first development in Ashbourne where we've had the opportunity, based on the developer approaching us about this, to retrospectively try and fit that sports calculator to the development, but it would specify a certain amount of money per unit, and that is how we come up with the calculation of the 71,000. If we depart from that philosophy, then we wouldn't be asking for a contribution that was really reasonably related in scale and kind to what was proposed with the housing development. So that's the figure, that's what we come out with. Doesn't mean that other developments around Ashbourne that come forward in the future aren't capable of helping to support this project as well, and it doesn't obviously prevent other individuals from making contributions to take them over the line, but in terms of what's reasonably related in planning terms, that's as far as we can take it.
Any more questions, members? Councillor
So I just want to clarify Section 106. You can use Section 106 for sports facilities, then, can you? Is that correct? I knew you could do it for education and health facilities. I didn't realise it could be for sport.
Yes, it can. I mean, the expectation is that the council identifies through the local plan process and coming up with supplementary guidance to support those plan policies, comes up with a series of projects that go beyond the localised level of the individual housing project. So housing in general generates the need for sports pitches, particularly in the case of Ashbourne, but also some of our other settlements. There's been a lot of housing expansion, so there is pressure on existing facilities. So we will be looking at opportunities to upgrade existing facilities, but also provide new facilities where possible.
Yeah, in terms of the how much affordable housing was proposed under the original scheme? Are we talking about a comparable amount of affordable housing, or has there been a reduction?
The original application proposed 25% provision on site and then an off-site contribution up to 45% provision overall. So it's a development now of 110 houses. So you're looking at on-site delivery roughly of around 27 units. But that is on the proviso that you can find a registered social landlord out there that's willing to take on those units, because to the developer, they sell those units at a discount on the open market value, and registered providers out there have to take a risk and they have to get money to lend against those properties. But if there's no demand for those properties, then there's going to be no interest from a registered social landlord, as is the case here, where the developer has gone out to market to try and find a registered social landlord to take on these units, and there's no one out there willing to take them on. So they've got to look at all other ways of trying to ensure delivery on site, and this has been put forward as a creative way of dealing with that, to ensure some delivery on site, albeit these units will be gifted to a registered provider as opposed to sold to them for a discount on the open market value.
And how many are likely to be off-site?
It's difficult because the off-site contribution is a commuted sum. So if you look at the report, the original requirement was for 20% of overall provision to be in the form of a commuted sum, and the amount, and I've done a calculation of what that translated to in terms of financial amount, and you'll see there's an enhanced financial contribution in recognition that the delivery of 7, albeit at zero cost, isn't equivalent to 25% provision on site, so it's to make up for that shortfall.
Yeah, John.
Clearly the delivery of affordable housing is a key objective, and has been a key objective for the council for some considerable time. What we have in Ashbourne is an unusual situation whereby we've had a lot of housing developments coming forward over a short period of time. Now, in an ideal world, we would release housing gradually over the planned period, so new household formation ties in with the release of those housing sites, but we cannot control the speed at which developers get on sites, and that's created this sort of lump, if you like, in the trajectory of the potential affordable units that could come forward. And the RSLs have turned around to us and said, look, we have to use our resources across the East Midlands or a wider area. If we take on those particular units, we're not sure that we'll have tenants for them. And that's the worst case scenario for everybody involved in affordable housing, to build the units and then find we can't find tenants for them. So that's why we're being creative here, having the units gifted to an RSL. If there is a short period of being an empty property, it's not as catastrophic in terms of their management of that, but also by taking an off-site contribution, we can be actively involved in promoting schemes and opportunities around the Dales to get best value for that financial contribution.
Thank you. Now we're going to move into debate. For somebody to move the recommendation as set out.
I'll move, Chair.
Does that find seconded?
I'll second you.
Councillor Froggett. Yeah. So that's been moved and seconded for approval of the report. All those in favour, please show. Against? Abstention? So that is carried. Thank you very much. Item 5, we'll move swiftly on. Information on active and closed enforcement and investigations for noted. I so move. Second Chair. All those in favour? Item number 6, appeals process report. I don't know whether John wants to say
Yes, Chair. Got a couple of updates for you. First of all, just find the right page. On page 108 on the agenda, good news on a couple of appeals at the Red Lion Hotel Marketplace Worksworth. Glad to report that the council successfully defended those 2 refusals of planning permission. So that's good from our perspective. Also, going back a page to page 107, you'll see second from bottom on that page, there's an appeal lodged with us in relation to a refusal of planning permission at 1 Union Street, Ashbourne. Members that sat on the previous council will recall that that related to the provision of an adult gaming centre within Ashbourne Town Centre on the fringes of the town centre. Members, after having considered that item twice, went contrary to officer recommendation in turning that scheme down on residential amenity grounds. Now, officers have prepared the bulk of an appeal case on the council's behalf to try and defend that position, but you need to be aware that in terms of making the case on residential amenity, we need some assistance from members to ensure that we properly reflect your views in trying to defend the council's position. I know that Councillor Slack was the mover of that proposition, and I'm after committee approval, if possible, to try and engage Councillor Slack in that process to best defend your position.
Councillor Slack?
Yes, I will assist in that job. Yeah, definitely.
Thank you very much, Councillor. So I'll move them for noted. Let's not find a seconder. Nobody opposed. Thanks, Paul. All those in favour? Please show. Thank you. And that's it. Concludes our business for tonight. Thank you very much. So we can all go home and watch this lovely debate. We're going to try to find a new leader of the country.
Major computer Windows will cancel.